Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about interviews, so let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, as a software engineering interviewer, if you find that the candidate that you're interviewing is someone you know well, would you feel awkward interviewing them? Nope. Not whatsoever, because the interviewing processes that I usually am part of are it's a pretty straightforward thing. It's the same interviewing that we do for, like I do for everyone. I've said this in a few videos before, guys. I can give you all the questions I will ask you, every single one, ahead of time. And I promise you, even if you know what I'm going to ask, you're not going to be able to trick me into believing that you are a senior if you're a junior, or if you're this or that and so forth. There is absolutely no way you're going to be able to do it, because as I've explained in other videos, guys, the fact that you know what's going to happen doesn't change the fact that you cannot fake experience that you don't have. It's not possible. And I can tweak any question you can possibly imagine, even if even if you know that, for example, I'm going to ask you about about promises in JavaScript, or I'm going to talk about multi-threading in Java, or we're going to talk about polymorphism, etc., etc. And I just ask you because that's what someone who doesn't really know anything. You're going to know the basics. You're going to be able to tell me about the basics of like polymorphism, for example. And then all I have to tweak and say is to say, under what circumstances would you say that functional programming is favorable over object-oriented programming? Or like, at what point would you say an abstract class is to be preferred over an interface? When do you use a class? When do you use a struct, etc., etc. Like if I am in the slightest bit unsure whether or not you know your stuff, it's very easy to just latch on a few extra questions. If I hear that you're basically just giving me the standard answer, and then of course you hear it usually in the way how confident people are, because people who really know their shit, they usually don't dilly-dally about and like are fluffy about how they speak. Usually they're fairly straightforward when it comes to just giving an answer. And even in a very complicated situation, it's sort of how I sometimes drift off, and I kind of like just like I am right now, jibber-jabbering all over the place. Even when the questions are complicated, you can hear that there's not very little fluff, or less fluff than someone who doesn't really know. So because that's, and the second part to this is that if it's someone I really know, it's not like I'm the only interviewer here, guys. I have a very strict policy when it comes to being part of interviews and helping companies out with that sort of stuff, and that is that there should always be two people. Because and I've had that coaching session. I have had a few coaching sessions with. I was working with a software developer who she had been working for longer than me. Like, she had more years of experience than I did. I had only worked at the company in question a few months longer than her, but I had done quite a few interviews in my day, if that makes sense. And so when we sat down and we had interviews together, she was a little bit on the quiet side, so forth and so forth. But she expressed her opinions, etc., etc. And then so I told her basically that, what, maybe you could next time, let's see you lead the conversation. I'll be like, you start, you introduce yourself to the candidate, and you do all the things, and then I'll just jump in. You just ask me if there's something that you feel like you would like me to elaborate on. At first she was like, no, it's too early for me. And then after a few times, so I asked again, and then she was like, yeah, okay, a little bit more. And then I think after a few months later, she was like she basically did that. Like it was completely like besides the point that I was in the conversation, and so she built up the confidence because she understood the point of us both being there. And I told her the point of us both being here, because her comment was, of course, well, I'm not so experienced, and all the you seem so good, or quote unquote, you're so good at this thing. And I go, that's not the point. The point isn't like the reason why you think that I'm quote unquote good at this stuff is because I have asked these questions 100 times before, and you have more experience than I do. You can all the feedback that you are providing is just as valuable as my feedback, because this is it's a candidate, and it's up to the both of us to make an accurate assessment. And then we can go and talk to each other and say, we would say that this person is about this skill or that skill, like they are at this level, that level, etc., etc. It's not like if because the problem is that if you only go with what I say, well, then hypothetically you're just going to get one type of developer into the company. And I know that I might be giving you that idea, but guys, I don't know all the things about what makes someone a very good software developer. I like to think that I have a pretty good gut feeling for things, but that doesn't mean that I can't be wrong. And that, as I've said to her as well, then we're just going to have one type of person in the company. It's like people that I think are good. And to be fair, it's been very rare that the interviewers are like vastly different in opinions of like who's a good candidate, who's a bad candidate, because the criteria for being an interview, at least where I've been working, is that you're a software developer, a full-fledged professional software developer. You are not someone who is a manager, who used to be a something. You code more than you do anything else. That is the requirement. And so if I know the candidate, there's like we might talk a little bit more, like hopefully everything's going to be a little bit more relaxed, but it's still the same questions. If they don't know their stuff, they don't know their stuff, and there's really nothing I can do about that, because as I said, I'm not the only person who's going to do the review. And there is, I've even said so to some people who called me, who asked about that, like how do I help out my friends, etc., etc. And I go, you can't really help them, because this is getting a job as a software developer is it's more. It's not like you can put in a good word for people, but that will only go so far. This is a merit-based job, if that makes sense. It's not something where, quote unquote, anybody would do if they just have someone who vouches for them. This is a job where you either have the skills or you don't. And so to me, it's really nothing to talk to someone I know within in an interview. Guys, I've even been in situations where people who actually, I've had interviews with people who have watched my videos, and we sort of like laughed a little bit. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, you're. They pointed me. Hey, it's you. And I kind of go, oh yeah, it's me. Hey. And then we talked for 2 minutes, and then we went straight into it. Nothing more than that. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, I don't think that I would feel very awkward about interviewing someone I know, and I can tell you guys, I think that it might feel that way for you to start off with. But as I said, guys, if you have a well-working interviewing process, it's really not much different from talking to anyone who's gonna like apply for a job. It's the same deal. It's you get into this rhythm of the whole thing where it's like I have interviewed so many people now that it doesn't matter if it's like my best friend who comes in and sits down and I go like, hey dude, and then we might chit chat a little bit, because we have the same sort of forum, right? Platform for everyone. So it's the same deal for everyone, and I try to treat everybody as friendly as possible to de-escalate the situation. It's very difficult for a lot of candidates. It's nervous, and I mean I'm nervous as well when I do an interview, so it's nice to be like chummy and so forth. But then when we get into the actual questions, it's the same questions, as I said. And you usually don't do these sorts of interviews with just one person, because of this like bias that can be inherent to any situation. And so it's very good to have at least 2 people who are both software developers. And as I saw with my coworker, it's also a good idea for you to have people who are a little bit different in terms of like what they value, what they perceive. And I've been with the coworker I was talking about, for example. She was we've only had a few occasions where our differences in mindset has been sort of clear, where we've interviewed people who were more aesthetic in their way of thinking and more biased towards the engineering and like that sort of area, and she was more saying that I look more favorably on the candidate who was more aesthetic and design oriented. And I went, but this person has computer science background and I'm more that way. So, and then we talked about it, and we still came to the conclusion that there's a way forward here. So a little bit of diversity is also good, and I promise you guys, it's really up to you if you're going to make this uncomfortable or not, because there shouldn't be any stress on you as the interviewer, because your company should have established a interview process that is fair and well working, regardless of who's sitting in as the candidate for the job. Have a great day.